So as I was praying for you guys this week, I feel like the Lord gave me a word of encouragement, a word of direction, and a word of caution all together. I think about as we're having a child and say she's 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, getting older, and if she begins to go in a direction that is not good, what would any good father do? He'd caution her, he'd warn her. He would say, hey, no, don't go in the street. You got to look both ways, or don't go without me. Don't talk to strangers and let them just pick you up. You warn them, you caution them. At the same time, you encourage them what to do besides going in the wrong direction. So tonight, as I was praying, the Lord gave me this phrase, but he says, the ambassadors are under attack. In 2 Corinthians, it says that we are the ambassadors of Christ, meaning we are the representatives of God. That's 2 Corinthians 5. A couple of chapters earlier says that we are the fragrance of Christ. So not only do we represent him, but we literally smell like him. Even if you don't put deodorant on, you should maybe smell good. Maybe? I don't know. Probably not. Yeah, that didn't work anyways. But so he says the ambassadors are under attack, and here's how I feel like, and I feel like he's speaking directly to you guys in this ministry, is that the way the enemy is coming to your house is through worldliness. It's through worldliness. I heard a story from a pastor one time. He was leaving church, and one day he got a knock on his door. He was a single pastor, wasn't married, and he opens the door, and it's this lady at the door, and she had this coat on, and she takes her coat off, and she was in lingerie. Just blatantly right in front of his door. Now, it's pretty obvious if you are a Christian, what do? You shut the door. I hope you would. It's pretty obvious. You realize, okay, this is Satan trying to catch me. Peace out. But I have to say that Satan doesn't come that way a lot of the times. What he does is that, he wants you to jump off the cliff. He doesn't tell you to run to the cliff, but step by step, he'll lead you closer to the cliff. Just one more step. Just one more. It's okay. Sin is not a big deal. It's okay. So it's through worldliness. So open your Bibles to Genesis 32. Here's what I want to do. There's 3 areas I feel like the Lord spoke to me about how the enemy is tempting you, is trying to get you. Genesis 32. And so I don't want to do this. Here's what we usually happen is that God gives me a word about something more on the negative side. And so we'll look at people in Scripture who jacked up, who messed up. Look at like Judas, someone who betrayed Jesus. If God gave me a word that he feels like someone's going to betray him soon, so we'll look at Judas. But here's what I want to do. I want to look at people in Scripture who actually got it right. So if they're tempted in one area, they actually got it right and overcame. Because we have to take that as encouragement for us. And so here's the first word God was speaking to me about, is that he's saying some of you are seeking to move ahead of God's timing for your life. You're feeling the pressure to move ahead without God since he is not moving. The fear of man, the fear of man and pride is creeping in to get you to move forward in certain areas in your life, whether it's a job, whether it's a relationship, whether it's your hopes and dreams, your calling. The enemy is saying, hey, come on. Come with me. Leave the Lord. Don't wait on the Lord. Move ahead. One of the worst things I feel like that can happen for any of you is you being promoted before your time. Yeah. If you are promoted before your time, you look at Saul, it cost him his life. But we're going to look at a story of Jacob. Go to Genesis 32. We're going to look at some of the difficulties Jacob faced. Verses 1 through 21. We're not going to read all of these, but this is where Jacob had a brother Esau. And Jacob actually Esau's the firstborn, so he gets the inheritance and the blessing from his father. Jacob deceives him and receives that blessing and that birthright from his older brother. And And so now Jacob's like, oh, he's supposed to be king. He has the blessing from his father. Now he feels bad because his brother is coming and chasing him, and he thinks his brother is going to kill him. So through these verses, Jacob literally sends animals, whatever kind of animals they had in there. He sends them to Esau as a blessing to try to appease Esau's anger, trying to make him mad. So he'll send him a herd of animals to him as a blessing to him. And so he does that verses 1 through 21. And so we go to verse 22. Here's what it says. And he arose that night and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed over the ford Jabbok. He took them and sent them over the brook and sent over what he had. And Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. Now when he saw that he did not prevail against him, he touched the socket of his hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip was out of joint as he wrestled with him. So he's getting pursued by his brother. It's interesting, in a most pressured moment, he feels his brother's anger at him. He's getting pursued. He comes to a river and he sends his family and everyone over in his possessions, but he doesn't cross the river. If I read that story, I'm like, Jacob, cross the river. I mean, he's coming for you. He's coming to kill you. He's probably not happy. Instead, so what he does is he actually waits on the Lord intentionally. And so for God's timing for your life, here's what we do in a season when we're waiting on the Lord, is that we just think, okay, I'll just let time pass by. I'll just kind of keep busy, and then the Lord will eventually show up. Waiting on the Lord is intentional. If you're in a season where you're waiting on the Lord, it's all about your intentions. And so just to think that you can sit back, relax, coast, keep it easy, I'm just going to wait on you, Lord, not do anything, you're missing the mark. So Jacob, he decides to send everyone else over, and he wrestles with the Lord. This place that he stayed at, Jabbok, can you get in verse 1? Yeah, Jabbok. It's a river that he crossed. Here's what that place means, Jabbok. It means emptying, pouring out, or wrestling. This place means emptying, pouring out, and wrestling. And so for you in your life, how this applies to you, instead of you moving ahead of God's timing, this is the season where you actually have to be intentional about not moving forward and emptying yourself out, pouring yourself out face to face with God. He ends up calling this place Peniel, which means face to face with God. So how's our face to face interaction with God in this season? This has to be a season for you of you humbling yourself, realizing you don't know the timing of the Lord, and you're waiting on Him. James 4:6 says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. He opposes the proud. That word opposes, that's a warlike term. They did a study on that word in the Greek, and it literally means this, that there's one army here, that's you, you're over here, and God's over here. And the word opposes means this. It means that you literally dig yourself in the ground on one side. God digs himself in the ground. You're over here, and you dig yourself in the ground, and you begin to war. You have a trench war. So when God opposes you, he's digging as deep in the ground where you cannot move him. And then in our pride, we think that we can dig in the ground and he can't move us. It's a scary place to be. Where God, he will not let you win when you have pride in your heart towards him or towards others. He will not let you win. And it's something we got to be willing to deal with. Are we going to submit to him? Are we going to say, all right, Lord, yes? A lot of times we feel like we just need to give up. But it's like, why would we just give in? All right, Lord, I quit. You win. No, give in to him. Find a resting place in him. And so, not moving ahead of God's timing, feeling the pressure. It's funny that Jacob felt pressure from his family, from his brother. How many of you hear us feel pressure from our family to do something with our life? to move forward, to go to school, to get a job, to do all these things that are really good. I'm not saying don't get a job and be homeless. I'm saying get a job. But at the same time, family will pressure you, make you feel like you should do something that the Lord's not maybe calling you to do. And that's most difficult to wait on God. And then you tell your family you're waiting on God, and they're like, "You doing what?"
Crazy.
Waiting on God. What does that even mean? But are you going to fear your parents, or are you going to fear the Lord? Are you going to submit to your parents' ways, or submit to God's ways? Now, I'm not saying disrespect your parents. You got to honor your parents. If there's issues there, you got to work it out. But I think this is a season where a lot of you are going to be resolving issues with your family. So we see in this story, it says Jacob was left alone and he wrestled with the man. This man was an angel. Some say this man was actually Jesus himself, but it says that he was alone in this season. How many of us like to be alone? All the introverts, yeah, raise your hand. That's me. But to be alone, not fearing to be alone in this season. Because I think here's what we do is that we fill our schedule with stuff to do, and we have no time for Jesus. And that's what he's asking for in this time. So let's go to 1 Samuel. So moving ahead of God's timing, Jacob actually gets it right. He does not rush ahead of God. He intentionally waits on the Lord, even though the Lord never said, "Wait on me, Jacob." He decides to do it because he wants direction, he wants timing. Here's the second thing I feel like the Lord was speaking to me about some of you. 1 Samuel chapter 30. Samuel chapter 30. Another point I wanted to mention on God's timing, you look at the life of Jesus. How many times in the Gospel of John does he say, "I only do what I see the Father doing. I only speak what I see the Father speak"? Are we at that place where we only speak what the Father is speaking to us? I had a dream a couple nights ago that I have a safety blade at home, and it comes separately with razors. Those razors are probably about this big, and it's just an individual razor. Well, I had a dream that razor was in my mouth, and I was trying to speak, and I couldn't speak. I could feel the razor hitting my tooth, hitting my gums, and I couldn't really speak, and I had to be really careful with what I was saying. And it's like, what would it look like if we as believers always had a razor in our mouth, and every time we spoke a false word, every time we gossiped, every time we said something that the Lord would not say, it would cut the inside of our mouth? Some of us wouldn't have a mouth probably. But it was an intense dream, and then Allison shows me Psalm 52 where it talks about a tongue can be destructive like a razor. So are we speaking what God is speaking? Are we saying what he is saying? Are we doing what he is doing? 1 Samuel 30. David was about to go out and fight the Philistines. Instead, he returns to a place called Ziklag, which is his home. It says, verse 1, "Now it happened when David and his men came to Ziklag on the third day that the Amalekites had invaded the south and Ziklag, attacked Ziklag and burned it with fire, and had taken captive the women and those who were there, from small to great. They did not kill anyone, but carried them away and went their way. So David and his men came to the city, and there it was, burned with fire, and their wives, their sons, their daughters had been taken captive. Then David and the people who were with him lifted up their voices and wept until they had no more power to weep. David and his 2 wives also had been taken captive." Verse 6, "Now David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him, because the soul of all the people was grieved, every man for his sons and daughters. But David strengthened himself in the Lord." Here's what the Lord was speaking to me. That some of you are refusing or or avoiding going into the refuge with the Lord. Not this ministry, the refuge, but in the secret place where he's a refuge, he's a strong tower. Did you feel like or here's what it is that you're refusing to go to him and deal with yourself. It's crazy how, man, and I do this too, it's crazy how it's so easy to deal with other people. Like, I know your problem. I know your problem. I know your problem. It's easy to do that. But it comes to our problems and it's like, no, I'm good. Nah, Lord, don't point that out on me. I don't want you to go that deep. You feel like you're running with the Lord, but you're actually running from him. You feel like you're running with him, but you're running from him. This is a form of rebellion. The Lord is calling you to him, and you don't go to him. That's rebellion. And here's the thing that it blows my mind is that when we run from him, we are running from the source of grace and truth in our life. We're running from the one who actually truly loves us, who cares about us more than anyone else, who actually has the plan and purposes for our life. And yet we refuse to go to him that we may have life. It's like when we sit and think about that, we're like, man, I'm an idiot. What's wrong with me? Like all these problems are happening in my life. And I'm like, the last person I want to go to is the Lord. It's like, Brandon, what are you doing? He has the answers. If you just look at him, everything will be better, I promise. So David, he goes back home. This place called Ziklag. This is actually his home. This is his place where he lives. It says that his family was taken captive, lost all his possessions, and then his own army turned on him and wanted to stone him. That's a pretty crappy place to be. That's the last place I would want to be. So how does he overcome it? It says he strengthened himself in the Lord. And so say you go back home tonight and ISIS stopped by your house, took your parents, took your family, took all your possessions, and then all of us came to your house and said, hey man, what's wrong with you, dude? Get over yourself. And we just were harsh towards you. Would you run to the place of the Lord and find your strength in him? Would that be the first thing you do is say, all right, Lord, I need just to lay everything down and get before you? It's crazy that David, that's the first thing that happened, is that everything in life went against him and he still found his place in the Lord. All of his possessions were taken away. This is the season in your life where he's taking away your possessions. You probably feel unanointed. You probably feel unimportant. You probably feel alone. That's all intentional. The Lord is stripping you of all your resources. David had nothing left. No home, no family. What does he go to? His own army is turning against him, so he's probably not really a good leader anymore. So you probably feel like you're not a good leader, and you're like, all your resources are being stripped down bare to see what you're really made of. And let's be honest, we got to say, Lord, I'm nothing. 2 Corinthians, Paul gives us some insight into this season that David was in. Chris, can you go there, 2 Corinthians 12? Go to verse 8. So David was stripped all of his resources. Concerning this, I implored the Lord 3 times that it might leave me. This is talking about how he had a thorn in the flesh. And God said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is perfected in weakness. God's power is perfected in your weakness. Most gladly, therefore, I will rather boast about my weaknesses so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. How many of us want to boast about our weaknesses? Anybody? What's the next verse? Therefore, I am well content with weaknesses, with insults, with distresses, with persecutions, with difficulties, for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. On I'm telling you, if you guys don't get branded with this scripture at this season of your life, it'd be hard to say you're walking with him 30 years from now. And in my season of preparation in Lakeland, the very phrase that literally saved me in that season, that kept me, was I heard it from one of my mentors. He says, Brandon, he's like, you are free to be small in the eyes of God. You are free to be small in the eyes of other people. You're free to be small in your own eyes. So all this pressure came off of me of trying to be a hero, trying to be a big shot, Brandon, I know it all. I got all the good advice. I know all the scriptures, all that stuff. Just laid it down. And I actually boasted and said, Lord, I don't know anything, Lord. I'm unqualified. I'm unequipped. I know it now. I really do. So that was branded with insults, with distresses, with persecutions and difficulties. That's where David was at. Everything he had in his life left him, yet he still strengthens himself in the Lord. If you look at the life of Jesus, did he not strengthen himself in the Lord? People wanted to stone him all the time. Disciples ended up leaving him. Spent a lot of time alone, yet he still strengthens himself in the Lord. Go to Nehemiah. This is the last one I want to look at. Nehemiah is one of my favorite guys in the scriptures. So in this season, here's the third point. In this season, some of you may not be taking the call of God on your life seriously. You feel like nothing significant is happening in your life. You can't seem to see anything extravagant coming into your life, so you're coasting. Not taking God's call in your life seriously. Now, I'm not talking about you starting to strive in a way that is feeling like all the weight and all the pressure's on you. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about we do have to put forth effort, and God will impart His grace. If we don't want to put forth any effort, I don't think He's going to impart grace. It has to. Our hearts have to be willing to some degree to meet with God. So Nehemiah chapter 1. Let's go to verse 2. It says, one of his brethren came with men from Judah, and I asked them concerning the Jews who had escaped, who had survived the captivity concerning Jerusalem. And they said to me, survivors who are left from the captivity in the province are there in great distress and reproach. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates are burned with fire. So Nehemiah, when he heard these things, he sat down and wept and mourned for many days. He says, I was fasting and praying before the God of heaven. Verses 5 through 11, he says a prayer. Verse 11, he says, oh Lord, I pray, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who desire to fear your name, and let your servant prosper this day. I pray and grant him mercy in the sight of this man. He says, for I was the king's cupbearer. So Nehemiah hears that his own people grew. The walls, they're in ruins, they're in captivity, they're in reproach and distress. The walls of his hometown have been broken down. He catches word of this. All the while, he is a cupbearer to a pagan king. And a cupbearer in that time, what you literally do is that you take water to the king. That's all you do. Not only that, what they would make you do as a cupbearer is that when you come into the presence of the king, you pour that water in your hand, drink it, give it to the king, just so the king knows it's not poison. Another thing you would do is as you walk in the presence of the king, you literally would cover their mouth with their right hand for fear that their breath would defile the king. So some of them had really hot breath. So you literally have to cover your mouth. So, in this season, God has called you to be a servant. Nehemiah was a cupbearer. He was a servant. Nothing special. He didn't do anything spectacular. All he did was simply serve in this season of preparation. And when all of a sudden he hears of issues going on in his native land, he knows the word of the Lord. He knows what to do. And so in this season, there's a proverb that says, the soul of a lazy man desires and has nothing. But the soul of a diligent man has much. And so Nehemiah, he was a career man. He just worked a job. But he was not lazy, and he was diligent in his work for the Lord. It goes on to say how he asked the king, he said, "King, can I go back to my native land and help them out?" And the king says, "Yeah, sure. How long will you be gone?" "Okay, great. Go for it." So he even has a letter of recommendation from the king to accomplish God's will, because he was a working man, because he actually worked hard. And so in this season, it's easy to not take the call of God on your life seriously. It's easy just to coast, because you're like, "Oh, there's nothing important going on. I'll just come to church, show up, I'll go to the Christian outings, I'll do whatever, I just kind of hang out, and then hopefully somebody will give me a call one day and I'll catch my break." But whatever happens, you just simply serve in Jesus. Just simply serving Him. It's crazy because in the Gospels, the Pharisees and even the disciples, they were caught off guard by this man Jesus, because they expected the Messiah to come with power, with authority, with dominion, with lording over people, being in a higher place. But you look at what he says in Matthew 20, it says, "The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and give his life as a ransom for many." So how many times do we come to places and we expect people to serve us rather than we take off our clothes, put on a towel, and serve them? And so in this season, if we don't get marked with a heart of servanthood, I think we're missing it. Being willing to serve. Go to 1 Thessalonians. For some of you, you might be feeling discouraged, saying, "Brandon, man, this is difficult, man, this is hard. Why are you so mean?" Beloved, I went through this very same thing. It is absolutely necessary sometimes for us to hear what we don't want to hear. For us to get a taste of reality of what God is wanting to do, because God, there's people's lives at stake that are in the balance that you have the ability to affect. That you have the ability to reach lost people, to heal broken people. And if we're not equipped, if we're not ready, if we haven't been with Jesus, we're going to miss it. So here's the conclusion of why the Lord gave me these words about His timing, going into the secret place with Him, and taking the call of God on your life seriously. Because here's the reason why: because God is He's planting the gospel deep within you. He's not planting your calling, your gifting, your anointing, all these things you're good at. He's not concerned about that. That's great, that's good. I don't want to disregard that, but that's not His main focus. His main focus is that the gospel of Jesus Christ would be so deep within you that you lose sight of yourself. He says the ambassadors are under attack in order that they might lose focus on the mission. Christ in you, the hope of glory. I want to look at something real quick here. 1 Thessalonians chapter 2. Paul is writing to the church. He says, "For you know yourselves, brethren, that our coming to you was not in vain, but even after we had suffered before and were spitefully treated at Philippi, as you know, we were bold in our God to speak to you the gospel of God in much conflict. For our exhortation did not come from error or uncleanness, nor was it in deceit." Notice this verse: "But as we have been approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel, even so we speak, not as pleasing men, but pleasing God, who tests the heart." He says that he has been approved by God to be entrusted by the gospel. He's been approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel. Meaning God would not impart to Paul the fullness of the gospel unless he had been approved. What was part of his approval? He mentions it, that he was not trying to please man, but he was trying to please God. He even says in verse 6, nor do we seek glory from men. Another thing, he was approved. He didn't seek glory from people. Look at verse 8. This is what gets me too. He says, so affectionately longing for you, we were well pleased to impart to you not only the gospel of God, but also our own lives, because you had become so dear to us. So he's approved by God. And his life goal, his life mission, your life goal, your life mission is to impart the gospel to people. And Paul takes it a step forward, not only to do that, but I actually impart my life to you also. So my sins, my good things, my bad things, my whole life is an open book before you. And this scripture challenged me so much to not only come do ministry, come to preach to you guys, and all right guys, have a good week, and I'll see you next Sunday. It challenges me to, okay, yeah, I'm going to share the word with you, but do I actually know you? Do I actually have a caring heart for you? And so you look at the people in your life God has called you to minister to. It's just not ministering the gospel to them, but you're actually imparting your life to them. And so how much do we want to open up our lives to people? How much do we want to let people see the motives of our heart? To see the sins of our heart? I get fearful of letting my wife see my sins. Oh no. But we're talking about even going, say we had a conference or we went somewhere. And not only did we share the gospel with people, but we were seriously an open book. It didn't matter what was in our past, we were willing to share it. Say, hey, I used to have sex with women, drink, smoke, do all these things. And say, hey, that was my life. I'm an open book to you guys. And impart the gospel to them and impart our life to us. That was part of his approval, to be entrusted with the gospel. To not have love without hypocrisy. And so my heart for us tonight is that through worldliness, through the devil saying, hey, don't take it so seriously. Hey, it's okay if you don't spend time with God this week. It's okay. It's not a big deal. You know, nothing happens when you spend time with him anyway. You just sit there and it's just quiet and it's boring. It's okay if you move ahead of God's time and you're like, God will catch up. He'll catch up with you soon, or he'll bless you still. It's okay if you don't take the call in your life seriously. Not a big deal. God will find someone else. There's lies that the enemy will speak to us that just draws us away from the Lord. More and more and more. I'm going to ask Allison to come to get back on the keys. And I want to just have a small time of ministry to one another. I'm here to pray for you guys. I'm here to help you out. But it's crazy how one day we can have the fire of God living in us, and just day by day, just dies. We're in the school of boredom. We're in a season of boredom, and after a while, if I don't go to a conference, or if I don't have a crazy deep encounter with God, or if I don't get a prophetic word, life kind of sucks, and I don't want to follow God anymore. We have to be able to press past that. We have to realize there's grace for us in this season with God.